Dimensions may be made of different natures or colors. Some may combine easily and others not at all, or may even repel or take reactive configurations. I'm going to do some editing on my story here today as I read this. The universe with the diaphragm system and Silky Way galaxy is a four-brain universe. That was not entirely disadvantageous for poor poops that were able to free themselves from the reductive powers of Aristarchs, if they only knew. Hard Carbon was mostly human. The poor poops also were human, yet they were as aliens to Carbon. He had changed, promoted to being from the nothingness of the blood pool of which he had no actual memory, and given a state-of-the-art neural mind control actuator nestled in his cortex that trained his thought to the best killing efficiency deemed appropriate for him by the benevolent Aristarchs. He calculated an intercept course to take down the plainly malfunctioning John Dwight. The Shenzing AI was networked with the Moon AI controller of its subatomic composition and ordered it to part enough to enable a high-velocity, friction-free penetration of the craft through the lunar surface into its Teutonic depths. It slowed to maximum survivable descent speed within 15 meters of Dwight, who already was entering a probability exfiltration phase. Dwight's backpack auto-sensor shot EMP grenades and quark fog at the Shenzing that landed in smoking melt rubble. Dwight's actual position auto-strobed for most OPFOR sensory targeting systems while he ascended the wire upward. In the Shenzing, Hard Carbon saw jackrabbiting prey escaping the close confines of the storage chamber with growing frustration. The will-o'-the-wisp soon disappeared through the ceiling while his tracking tech was returning inaccurate locations on the Dwight prey. In addition to being a moon-sized solar energy collecting and storage surface, Diaphragm's main moon enchilada was infused with an 8 print-on instruction nanotech ops that permitted it to reshape itself into any material form for habitation or utility structures on demand. And so I wanted to say something about the double-hulled Dyson spheres that I mentioned later on in the story. I wanted to elaborate on the idea. An inner hull, an inner Dyson sphere, people could live on the outside of it and at the right distance from the red dwarf star inside that provides all of its energy and have a normal gravity for them, like Earth normal gravity if the Dyson sphere was built at the right distance from the star from which they would draw their gravitational field. And the outer hull, which would be perhaps 500 miles further beyond, would contain an atmosphere. So one could create a vast living surface with a planetary Earth normal gravity around a red dwarf star. And then I'll return to the away from that note. It presently resembled a ski slope lit eerily with blue-green light. Accelerating his escape to the surface, Dwight engaged electromagnetic lever-forward instructions to the wall magnets to propel him faster upward through the tube network. He thought of the unquenchable fires of hell that awaited those that failed to be saved by the Lord Jesus Christ, as he discovered in reading of God in the Holy Bible, transported from the ancient forerunner earth world of the Gentiles before the age of the Tridentilium Empire and the following rise of Aristarchus and his Aristarchs. So many people had drawn the wrong conclusions from the appearance of Darwin's theory of evolution. They believed that God was dead as a necessary inference from life evolving biologically. They believed the biblical explanation for the creation of life was incompatible with natural evolution, that God could not have used evolution for himself as a creative tool. And further, the lost believed that the book of Genesis could only be understood in terms completely antipathetic to biological evolutionary process. In that, they were entirely wrong. The destiny for those without faith in God was eternal hell, and that was the thought presently holding John Dwight's focus as he neared the lunar surface. Where could hell be physically located? Perhaps in the singularity, the beginning and end of time. Below absolute zero, physicists speculated that the opposite end of the heat spectrum existed as a virtually infinitely high temperature. Beyond the heat death of the universe, when entropy is dispersed, the subatomic quanta so far that individual particles are isolated and the temperature of space is absolute zero, hell awaits either as a membrane phase shift and or through gravitational recollapse into singularity. In a naked singularity of a black hole, time and motion virtually stop. Matter and energy are compacted to a condition with less actual energy than that of a Bose-Einstein condensate. Paradoxically, while all the energy and potential mass of the universe reaches its virtually infinitely small state of motionless, timeless stasis, it takes on the temperature of infinite hell. Because soul mapping continues even into the singularity, and no information is lost through conservation of Shannon entropy criteria, each soul that was not saved with the Lord and taken into heaven continues as a present mind experiencing eternal hell in the singularity, where Satan rules the remnant universe compacted to a smaller size than 1,492 angels dancing on a pinhead could imagine. Information, mass energy, and everything not extracted by God from the universe unto a special place eventually encounters eternal singularity in hell. Though they had a way out through faith, they would not be saved, Dwight thought with sadness. Below or inside the singularity, nothing existed besides everything left out of heaven and information. Beneath the absolute motionless compaction of everything that transformed temperature and time to absolute zero, each was information and infinite heat that the info minds experienced. Satan clawed through the sentient beings and the information of the universe in all of its forms, as ideas that rose and disappeared as images and ideas with which to torment his faithless captives forever. And the funny thing is, nothing of it was real. Nothing existed outside the minds and information of the singularity that Satan ruled from boundary to boundary that comprised no space-time at all. Orbitron. Standing on the highest entry point to the slope of Enchilada that presently was empty of human presence beside himself, John Dwight realized he had only moments to leave the world if he were to remain free of the Aerostar capture team. He was unaware that Hard Carbon had snagged himself on a rough edge exiting his Shenzing's craft's canopy, tripped and fallen to the floor leading with his chin and been knocked out. John summoned a space chute to extract him back to the edge of the Silky Way from Enchilada, or at least as close as he could get in one shot. Dwight didn't quite hear the vision. Then the 11th Malt slammed the door on the Skeezer Hawks with finality. He wondered why information was extracted. Mass and energy were drained into space such that nothing remained. The four dimensions took his information too and flung it fast forward toward a spatial point, glimmering and receding in the distance like a transparent diamond pinpoint. Space stretched from Enchilada like an infinitely telescoping membrane, and as it was in fact, and deposited his superposition informal self several thousand light years away from the realm of the Twitty Arcs, closer to the galactic center of power. Emptied of mass and energy with Skynet technology, a directed vector of space dimensions had expanded faster than light for a split second, as if it were a sliver of the faster-than-light inflaton near the beginning of the universe. His information was superposition in the arrow of space. Then mass and energy that were set aside, recomposed in the space phase, shifted back to normal space without leaving a gravitational ripple in it. Just the personal space and information of John Dwight remained at the tip of the spear, standing on the planet Orbitron. Boyle had initially been elected with promises to heat the water to a point where the world-covering ocean would begin to evaporate and eventually enable schools of subjects to return to dry land. Yet with a dozen years of global ocean warming, the sea continued to become more acidic and subjects began to slowly bake in hot water. Pathetic pictures posted on the world-encompassing social media pages of Fishbook agitated the masses with countless horrifying images of sores, lesions, and boils from the hot acidic water. Boyle was nothing if not adaptive, though. He developed a plan to attack the problem of the planet being underwater from the bottom up, even while promising to evaporate problems from the top down. Incredibly large freezing units to evaporate problems from the were built in the deepest chasms of the ocean floor, and in time, deep in the darkness of seldom-seen ocean trench, ice began to form on the seafloor from the bottom up. When Maxim Scumby arrived to search for the missing FTL-2 focal point, he had no choice except to get wet. The primary global collusion administered by Boyle and Twang joined subtle subterfuge with legendary strawman arguments gathered from sacred, genuinely scientifically endorsed myths made to reinforce errors of logic convenient to global campaign management specialists, minoring in truth-parsing designs for political economy efficiency controls. The primary collusion kept the Boyle and Twang method in power, and their systems designed programming for the environment inertially juggernauting over opposition. Political opposition to their iron flipper management style brought the small fish rivals to ruin, cast out of their evolution ladder niches into deeper and more turbulent, dangerous water. Maxim Scumby hated all of that. He also hated getting wet. Thus it was that viewing the condition of Synthewim on final approach after a 3-year mission of undisturbed sleep accelerated by electromagnetic accelerators at the rim of Diaphragm system, he decided to microwave the entire planetary ocean and vaporize it into space-time, creating a more dry and suitable world for the search. Maxim Scumby discovered the FTL-2 focal point in a sealed cave on a mountainside that formerly was 3,000 feet below the surface of the planet-covering ocean of Synthewim. He entered in and found the mechanisms and instructions simple to follow. He faced a difficult choice: send snail mail light speed data to the aristocracy at Coronation, or just send himself. Coronation. Aristarch Prime Troika leader Billy Kahn was reading over a speech that he would make for the Global Prize Committee that had awarded him the year's Feast Prize for training student interns to suck elite nests. He savored a hot cup of 91-year-old single-bean coffee from the Kenyan hills of the sublime Portyard on Svad Tas, enjoying a trill of pleasure when Sandra Lippi completed her lesson. Then Maxim Scumby materialized with a snapping gravitational focal point crash into a rare delicate congressional table, sending a Bing vase shattering into a million pieces. Scumby stood stock still after regaining his balance. Billy Kahn lifted his eyes over his library and glasses, and Sandra Booby Lippi to look at Scumby. "You know the penalty for disturbing teaching of the student interns, Scumby? I hope it is worth the price for you." "I had wished to arrive in the waiting hall outside," Aristarch Kahn. "My calculations on my first use of the FTL-2 tech system that I found in Synthewim were a bit off. An FTL-2 system is useful for us. As a reward, I shall spare you pain when your brain is removed and information extracted." Servobots emerged from the wall, extracted and drained the information from the brain of Scumby, adding a new and potentially lethal transportation tool for Aristarchs to play with. "Booby, I hate to break it off now, yet that is all the knowledge I can impart to you today. As important as the future generation of suckers is to me, there are pressing details of office that I cannot ignore. Same time tomorrow, sweetie. There, don't quiver. You can have more another day." Aristarch Billy Kahn watched his nude lithe showgirls, swingers, sweet Afton melons, walking away through the vast double doors of his expansive private office. He spoke into a hoverbot's omni-mic. "Sheila, set the United Nations Magyar legal specialist to prepare eviction notice for new star systems light years distant that I will provide addresses for later. Tell them to quit wasting public time on finding some weaselly way to return Abraham's legendary blessings upon them. They are lost, damned, doomed in mind to exploit in whatever way I will. And send the new tech engineer team to extract the FTL-2 tech from Synthewim. The coordinates are in the late Maxim Scumby's data. I want the FTL tech facility brought to Coronation in my personal quarters on this planet." Aristarch Kahn spoke into his ziplink. "Zillary, tell me who is the most wise man besides myself in Coronation." "That would be the metaphysician of Riga, Mistletoe. And where is he now?" "A dungeon in Coronation's South Pole. You aren't thinking of conferring with that poop, are you? His delusions of glory being an astronomer. Some astronomers still are insufferably conceited because of their belief that they discovered or made the universe. Automated electromagnetic spectral analysis of the universe with computers far surpassed human observations. Astronomers became fundamentally superfluous thousands of years ago. He can't possibly have anything useful to say. Entire occupations have ridden the coattails of a single inventor, Zillary. Few people are geniuses, as am I and other Aristarchs. I will dispose of Astronomer Tall after I extract useful data from it. Thanks, Twit." "Jolly Roger," Hillary said before she faced about and sauntered away. Kahn ordered the metaphysician to appear. In several minutes, a tall, emaciated fellow wearing an orange turn-to-glue and sprout feathers prison jumpsuit stood before him. "Tell me, metaphysician, wise man of few faster-than-light technologies. I have secured a second-generation, faster-than-light tech unit. Wish to know its principles of operation." "Honorable Aristarch, may I review the 4 fundamental types of known faster-than-light technologies? You may proceed." Aristarch Kahn, FTL-1 tech is what you have used so far, as I know, already. Vast quantities of mass and energy of space-time are forced together with tremendous concatenated power such that fault lines across space-time are made to exist, acting as vast one-dimensional strings. With right design, the vacant sections of space-time are bent and warped along the string lines, permitting a space-time disequilibrium that allows a snap back into place with a slingshot like whipsaw of an acute object placed correctly to another sector of space-time. Theorists have regarded it as extremely materially wasteful and costly. Yes, metaphysician Zillery called it very dirty and loved it. FTL2 tech that you say you have acquired may be explained with the idea of Einstein's two-dimensional rubber sheet of space-time with mass set upon it, forcing it to sink a little wherever mass is concentrated under gravity. If the space-time sheet is considered to have infinite elastic properties, or at least elastic until light speed, then it is possible to consider stretching space-time with a focal point of pressure such as a blunt-ended knitting needle. Given sufficient focus pressure, the rubber sheet may allow itself to be stretched away perpendicularly from the basic flat rubber sheet. And if the force is made to curve, the extruding cylinder of rubber could be forced to stretch so far as to bend around to touch the far end of the sheet. At that point, where the extruded sheet reaches and touches the rubber sheet at a distant location, the traveler is allowed to rupture and re-enter space-time in some distant place and time, while the extruding rubber cylinder instantly returns to its original position and place. The traveler in an FTL tech unit would not seem to himself to have moved anywhere at all. He would just be in a new space-time local. What about the properties Einstein described in general relativity about mass increasing infinitely as a traveler approaches the speed of light, and that time slows as one nears light speed? Consider again the rubber sheet, if you will, Aristarch-Kahn, an ordinary mass vehicle pressing upon it and encounters resistance. As it increases speed, Newton's principle of an equal and opposite force in opposition to any action applies. The more the speed increases, the more resistance and apparent mass increases on the accelerating vehicle. Even so, while the vehicle is pressing toward the speed of light, space is stretched and the vehicle embedded within it too, while the overall quantity of space-time remains the same. 1 inch unit time is stretched to the length of 10 units, while remaining 1 unit. Existing within that accelerated unit allows more subjectively to be done than for someone living in an unaccelerated stationary unit of unstretched space-time. Then pushing space-time itself to expand rather than a vessel pressing against it is the way to avoid increasing mass infinitely. Yes, Aristarch, FTL3 is simple enough too. One, in theory, exploits hidden smaller dimensions that traverse the larger dimensions to shortcut the space-time between the 3 large space dimensions and one of time. I don't know of anyone that has an FTL3 technology. What is level 4 technology, metaphysician? Aristarch, it is only understood partly in theory to me. It is said to involve cutting out a section of space-time from the Higgs field, including a sector of the Higgs field, creating a null space devoid of any tie to normal space-time in its dimensions and mass and energy, bypassing and short-circuiting gravity flowing through it to make every force go around it, then floating the detached mass and energy to another place in space-time before reattaching it. What becomes of the displaced mass in the receiving space-time when the ghost field contents of null space return to the misty? Your guess would be as good as mine, Aristarch. It could be quite a dangerous experiment to discover what the answer is. For your responses, I shall have Gucciabald vaporize you without torture on your return to the dungeon. 2 lever bots placed the prisoner under arm and floated him away to the distance required from Kahn's presence. Aristarch-Kahn's brow furrowed with thought, and he spun his model of the Silky Way before him, delighted with millions of diamond-like stars. He quit daydreaming of soft underbellies of borderlands, Ukraines, of great declining empires to snatch and expand into, when Zillery Gall appeared, slinking through his doors, wearing a lizard-skin, legless cling power suit heavily scented with sex hormones. I thought you would like an early lunch. Southern style, she emoted. Orbitron. A quiet year passed on Orbitron. Lena Loop and General Gua coordinated construction and defense activities across the outer bands of the galaxy from planets populated with human beings. Missions of exploration and habitation commenced to the most near neighboring galaxies. Recon missions to the inner galaxy, where most of the expanded Aristarch Empire was located, followed, reporting on the opposition force advance in its taking of human life that it regarded as nothing more than poops for elimination from the galaxy, except as it could fuel the expansion of Aristarchan goals. What neither the General nor Lena Loop knew was that the Aristarchs already were in the process of relocating a captured FTL tech unit from Synthewim to Coronation. In as little as 2 years, the Aristarchan forces would be easily able to deploy military forces as well as the subtle system drugged to the free human settlements of the outer bands. In the second year since her arrival on Orbitron, Carla Femme-Fibbentrop asked to reunite her echo-mind with her organic brain at home on Castor, located a few thousand light-years distant, midway through the primary galactic habitation zone. I went with her and observed the process whereby she reunited and took on the flesh of completely human form, while keeping the inner hyperstructure that would allow it to be shed and reconfigured if necessary. With her human flesh and standard organic structure, Carla Femme-Fibbentrop was a stunningly beautiful figure, and why not take on a beautiful appearance, as it was all immediately remedial human form and superficiality. In some ways, beauty really is only skin deep, any survivor of third-degree facial burns can attest. We returned to Orbitron after touring Castor's vast jungles and teeming biological reserves where originally earthy and animal and plant life had been set loose to naturally grow and evolve for tens of thousands of years with advanced human structures for living, keeping safely apart. Humans did not interfere with the progress of the global total species genomic interactive paradigm for a change, unlike the decimation of life systems on elite Aristarchan worlds that were reduced to inorganic pleasure computers, sometimes with saturation solar capture surfaces, totalizing cheap and nearly inexhaustible power supplies. At Orbitron one day, while chatting over coffee at a table overlooking the extra-dimensional core extrusions in the center of the world, Carla brought up the subject of her researches. Lena Loop was a quality instructor at all levels except for some sorts of postdoc research. She asked Wolfman, "Do you know why there are only 200,000 billionaires in the entire free galaxy?" Wolfman stopped gaming for a minute and looked at Lena Loop and said, "No." "Then let me explain, Wolfman. Long ago, on the original Earth, a very bright young apprentice of the philosopher named David Hume, Adam Smith, invented modern economics. Hitherto, economics largely was limited to trade practices under imperial rule. Human beings have an original sin of being unlimited consumers seeking to devour what fundamentally is energy to let them grow. Smarter human beings recognize that mankind has a spiritual nature that is primary even to the fleshy and voracious strives of the physical body. Should it be reawakened through the divine grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, spiritual insight informs humans of socially beneficial cooperative actions a priori. Young Adam Smith, the bright new economist, created the idea of liberalization of trade such that the imperial powers would not decree it and should instead allow citizens to conduct free trade themselves. Centuries later, the world economy had progressed and new technology allowed planetary communications and trade as fast as a computer could process data. Wealth became concentrated. The wealthy began to buy up the free market. In time, the free market evolved to become once more a de facto imperial toy with rule that did not allow politically free thought that might upset the economic control by elites. So, Lena, the free trade evolved itself back into captivity to imperials. Why didn't the ordinary people descend and reapportion through taxation and corporate legal reform some way to keep free trade from being dominated by concentrated wealthy people and corporations they own? Eventually, they did, Wolfman, on another planet where survivors learned the lesson that the overweening drive for consumption that leads to imperial subjectivity for the human race also destroyed the wonderful environment of the Earth as it was overconsumed to the point of becoming unfit to sustain life. Wolfman grew a little more concerned with the ancient story portraying the destruction of the original environment of the first planet of humankind in its long story. Do you think there is a lesson to be learned here, Wolfman? That left unchecked, the human drive to consume is like a virus on a planet's people and ecosphere, something like leprosy progressively moving across a body until it is consumed. Yes, something like that, Wolfman. Later, humanity realized after reflection upon its disasters that a philosophical value system and axiology for a realistic economic system needed to regard wealth as a function of the general well-being of all of the people of the culture. Rich people may be allowed, yet not so rich as to make the possession of wealth equal to the possession of political power. Billionaires in your deck are just a tiny percent of the trillions and trillions of humans living over the free expanse of the galaxy. They too realize that the security of all can be no greater than the security and wealth of the least of humanity. All of humanity are brought to exist within an effective constructive range of inventive and contemplative existence. Extremes of concentrated wealth and power, such as the Aristarchs and other imperialists use, are absent from a free human society. John Dwight and Carla Femme Fibbentrop arrived breathlessly. General Gua, Carla has revealed information letting us infer that the Aristarchs, in a worst-case scenario, may have obtained an FTL-2 unit from Synthewim. General Gua, grim with the news, said, "Lena, evacuate the children to the small Chaldean moon. We cannot afford to be unprepared for a sudden attack, unlikely though it may be." The general remembered the Battle of Stygia in the inner system long ago, when an uneasy truce between the aristocracy and free humans was suddenly shattered by a devastating surprise attack on the cold planet of Bitterwurst. Bitterwurst was a peaceful civilian outlier of the remaining free human worlds not dominated by the aristocracy. Royalty is blasphemy against man and God. No human, save the Lord Jesus Christ, is implicitly of more worth or greater than another, and Jesus was born in a stable. Call the counselors of the FTL-2 technology to survey all possible points of approach the aristocracy may be able to exploit to enter the outer bounds of the galaxy. Dispatch an FTL recovery team to Synthewim to retrieve the FTL-2 tech or destroy it in case it hasn't fallen into the hands of the Aristarchs, and determine how much time it would take for the Aristarchs to relocate the FTL-2 tech from Synthewim to Coronation in the event that the conceited and distrustful Aristarchs aren't willing to allow such an important transport tool to exist beyond their personal immediate control. John and Carla stay with me now, for as I develop a more full and synergistic battle plan, the devil may have already dispatched lysing vectors at us. General Gua looked at me for a moment with something resembling a smirk. Then he said, "Carla, with your physiological adaptation, you can do without an exobod. Yet for you, John, I think an exobod would be in order." "An exobod, sir?" The general ordered an exobod filter to appear, and in minutes a servo floater delivered one. "This is how it works, John. Your brain and body will be put into a very low metabolic state with cold, while your brain activity is amplified with sensors and relays in the exobod, forming a substitute for your lowered brain activity workload. The exobod will slow and compensate for the lowered function, so you may continue with an active mind and physical sensations of the world the exobod detects." General Gua watched as the exobod's self-animating retarded AI unit brought it up off the servo floater to walk toward me, open itself and wrap around my body, developing me with completely, after my clothing had dropped off with deactivation of magnetic fasteners. Immediately, the exobot AI began linking itself to my thought as it sealed itself around my head. I felt a mild jolt at the enhancement of my senses as amplified through the exobody. My body also felt the exoskeletal power of motivation and sensation kick in to approximate my own normal physical sensations. As the temperature of the suit began to drop, a mild anti-shock drug was administered that let me experience the decreasing temperature that sank far below freezing without distress. In a few minutes, my body had effectively fallen nearly asleep and dormant, with the exobot taking over the physical role of a human body that my mind rode within. The exobot is quite a bit stronger than your usual human body, John. You will find that your senses may also be increased at will should you decide it worthwhile to do so, including touch and smell, hearing and sight. What about taste, General? How quickly you've discovered one of the weak spots of the exobot. I hate to tell you this, but there won't be any more cheeseburgers or coffee with milk and sugar for you while in physically suspended animation. Carla, we have a dumb exobot for you that will provide the same features as John's standard XP without the brain cooling. If you want to use one of those, it would let you transit the void just as well, in addition to other environments adverse to human physiology that may present to you down the road. Yes, General, thanks. That might be useful. I had a question for the General to ask after Carla replied and waited for the appearance of his semi-XP. General, may I ask a question of you? There is quite a bit about the universe that I don't understand. Of course, John. Reanimation doesn't provide complete data learned from your former existence. The expansion or hyperinflation of the universe, sir, how did that happen? I am not a physical cosmologist, John Eda. I will tell you what I know of the subject as I understand it. The Outer Rim. There are galaxies such as the Silky Way that have existed in various forms since near the inception of the universe. Some of the stars, fewer than 30%, are remnants of that early age when the universe was less than 500 million years old. Red dwarf stars burn slowly and fade away at a pace less than the time required for the black hole called Sagittarius A, would need to consume all of the remaining stars of the galaxy. This Silky Way resembles in form a starfish with 4 main tentacles and a few lesser that are irregularly structured with fractals of millions of stars about which most often orbit planets from giant gas giants to small rocky worlds. Sagittarius A is like a mouth at the center of the tentacles drawing its arms back into itself for destruction. That is, it is a masochistic, self-hating nihilist bringing about its own destruction, though it may well be that it envisions itself as a kind of, still doing a bit of editing, kind of autoimmune disorder that will transform all normal mass into something else, something greater after it consumes and annihilates everything that exists. In some ways, a black hole is a role model for the Aristarch class of human. Because of Newton's inverse square law of gravity regarding distance and force, or better put in terms of Einstein's curvature of space expressed in general relativity, the spiral arms of the Silky Way swirl around the horrendous hungry mouth at the center of the wonderful whirlpool, drawing every bit of matter in the galaxy to destruction. It is a predictable wheel of fortune with a predestined end, unless the galaxy is lucky enough to be disrupted by collision with another galaxy drifting to its path, bringing millions of stars in wrenching whipsaws tossed into reorganize, like anarchic union remnants placing themselves in new alignments of convergence. Yet destiny may slingshot individual stars into extreme orbits beyond the edge of the galaxy, and even though through the galactic halo into the darkness of true intergalactic space, humanity's search for alien sentient life had existed for several thousand years, and none of that was ever found, for a simple reason. Sentient life forms that were smart enough to reach beyond their own biological nursery soon realized that the primary role of a primitive life, that is the consumption of other life for its energy and tastiness, made concealment of their awakened intelligence from other advanced species a priority if they were to survive. The latent characteristics of all biological life may not disappear when it achieves an advanced form of intellect. Species that gambled with their existence and broadcast their development loud and clear for the galaxy and universe to encounter were soon snuffed as rival sentient beings that sought them. Sometimes they were actually consumed as new species of ate on alien menus. Sometimes the newly awakened species camouflaged their presence from the universe and had a good chance for survival. Though the universe appeared devoid of alien sentient life, it was not. Many lived within double-hulled spheres surrounding red dwarf stars that burned at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 trillion years, fairly cheap and sustainable batteries for warming worlds. It was easy for the Aristarchs to use the FTL-2 tech system to disperse wise-guy invisible surveillance and scouting drones about the arms of the Silky Way in intervals adequate to survey the new expanse for acquisition. The drones could determine where human settlements were located and if they were opulent or shitholes worthy of complete destruction. Shithole worlds were cheap, and eyesore buildings were even less worth saving than the people that would allow such poverty to exist in the new realm of Aristarch envy. Aristarchs sought only to conquer the best of physical infrastructure, and assuredly not the worst, though they may very likely be raw, undeveloped resources worth bringing into the treasury. With the scout drones returning messages to the Aristarchs through their entry points where the messages could be snatched and returned to coronation, those planets selected for an invasion of monsters that would eat and poop the humans, compiling DNA genome records for the database of human poops the Aristarch kept, the time for conflict was fast approaching the galaxy. Carlyle doubted that the theology of the multiverse would be an acceptable subject on many worlds. Human worlds subject to the Aristarch impact already are under the rule of the supreme junta of justice that proscribed theology as a topic universally. Fortunately, the free worlds still tolerate being taller than enslaved worlds in their evil judicial decretals, and I've given the theology some thought for myself that I shall elaborate with you. Good, John, I thought you might. How can God predetermine and create a universe and be consistent with his nature as perfect and without sin or wickedness? Sin and wickedness exist in the universe and hence multiverse, and if they are predetermined, then God has created sin and wickedness too, no? I must stipulate a no, John. God cannot sin or create wickedness. Yet each exists, and the universe must be predetermined along with the multiverse if God is to have created it. Hell exists, John, and the Lord was crucified. Each was or are at least nominally wicked from my point of view. I don't mean that the plan of God to allow his Son to be crucified as a substitute for the original sin debt of humanity was wicked. It is just that it was existentially a wicked experience for the Lord, for any human to go through. Sure, Carla, wickedness exists, and the Lord, being omnipowerful, created not only it, he created everything else, and yet free will exists. For many, that is another apparently contradictory point about God. I believe, however, that the multiverse and quantum mechanics may account for each, as it also may account for quantum gravity and relativity. How so, John? Consider, Carla, that relativity requires a time dimension to exist as anything besides a static form of space-time composition. If the universe were entirely predetermined and pre-created in its fullness from alpha to omega, however, comparable to a digital action movie stored on a microchip, the relativistic effects and changes of space-time would be contingent and superficial emergent characteristics of the present timeline position of inhabitants of the movie. Even relativity would be an apparent rather than a real experience. Yes, John, I follow that. The characteristic of a fully created and static universe that had apparent motion experienced by people living within it, just as minds or thoughts experiencing it, as they move forward within the universe's space-time line, might well appear to have the qualities of real motion, time, and general relativity commonly regarded as actual qualities of space-time. Thus it is that there is a great difference between apparent and actual material facts regarded by a conscious mind, at least potentially or theoretically, as well as real and potential and actual and contingent evil. Plato's famous allegory of the cave recorded that idea many thousands of years ago in the Earth's lost past. Still, we have the problem of evil as it relates to God in addition to the nature of the multiverse and FTL 5 units to consider. Of course, John, please continue. An infinite multiverse could be encompassed by God as an idea predetermined yet infinitely malleable. For now, I will stipulate that the multiverse created is static and that minds existing within it experience it contingently without awareness that it is their ideas traveling within its spatio-temporal substance rather than multiverse or any given universe itself. Every possible universe in any form is pre-created within an idea of God that hasn't spatial-temporal dimension or scale. God is spirit. The multiverse is a contingent idea of less necessary size than that of a Planck length. Human beings may exist as emergent contingent beings within an emergent contingent universe, and have the option of choosing between good or evil in templates that are world lines that bring them through the universe as their own mind interacts with mass and energy and choices of other beings in a similar situation, rather than in an entirely epistemologically solipsistic universe where other people only appear to exist. And I believe that that would fit quite well with the infinite multiverse option too, the Everett idea of an infinite number of universes existing instead of world-line waveform collapses. So then you would retract your point that God is responsible for evil, even though he would allow evil templates to exist? Yes, I suppose that is fair enough. God does not do wickedness or evil, but allows people to bring them into being.